Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 16 of Be With Me. We're in season 6, which is just a break starting in the book of Galatians. I'm stuck on a verse today, which is always a good thing. And I'm going to start today by a title, which is Being Known by God. That's the title, Being Known by God. And I'm going to illustrate that with a story, and let's just start with the story. So at one point, I heard a lecture of a guy who went on what I would call a medical mission to a kind of a third world, I think it was a Caribbean country. And he was talking about the work they did and, helping people medically. And he was giving a slideshow or a PowerPoint. I don't remember how long ago it was. And there was photographs of the work they were doing and the people that they were helping. And then they had the picture of the compound, and I'll never forget. So there's like these, 10 or 12 foot high fence. And at the top of the fence was razor wire. It looked like when you drive by a federal prison or something. And that was the compound that they stayed in. And that is, they imprisoned themselves. So I raised my hand. I said, "Hey, what's the big fence for, and the razor wire at the top of it?" And he says, "Well," kind of his voice. I remember this. His voice kind of dropped down. He says, "Well, at night we would lock ourselves in. Otherwise," he kind of says, "well, otherwise we would have been robbed and raped and pillaged and murdered." It was like, wow. So they had built this fortress of, medical missions fortress. And then, so very dramatic moment. And then I said at the end, I said, give me some, one conclusion, what did you learn on this trip? And he says, and may I quote, he says, "I learned that man is basically good." It's just like, wait a minute. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, well, what is the razor wire for? What is the big fence for? How are you coming to that conclusion and denying the truth that you would be raped, murdered, and pillaged? So he comes to exactly the wrong conclusion for this whole trip. And I think that is going to be illustrated in our couple of verses here today. We're in a passage of Galatians chapter 4. Paul has just done talking about the purpose of the law. That is, it's acting as a birth mother where you can't get out of trouble yourself. In other words, you have a bad family history, and the law has this tutor along with it, which is to frustrate you and to nag you and tell you can't do it and leave us to the point where, oh boy, we need faith. We need to be just like Abraham, and we need to be adopted out of this birth mother family and given the spirit of his son into our hearts, and our response is this crying out, Abba. All right, so our verse today, official verse, is from Galatians chapter 4, verse 8 and 9. "Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not God's." And then here's the verse to pay attention to. "But now that you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God, how can you turn back again?" And he's going to go on, we'll talk about that tomorrow, but he's going to go on and say, how can you return to this fortress, the law, when God has given us so much? But the verse that caught me was, what is it like to be known by God? So he's giving perspective. Paul is giving them perspective. Hey, there was a before time when you did not know God, and now there's this after time when now you have come to know God, and he's yelling at them for kind of going back to the way you were doing things before. But my thought is this being known to God, being known by God. Now, let's talk about man being basically good. Anybody who says that man is basically good has never read the front page of any newspaper. Because if you read that carefully, you will see that man is basically not good. Or even, let's say you're just kind of leisurely watching TV at night. Well, Every show that's interesting is about the fallenness of man, the either the rotten characters or at least the flawed characters, um, uh, and that's what essentially every TV show, every movie is about this. Or if you've ever looked in your heart, have you ever lusted in your heart or dishonored your family or used the Lord's name in vain? And especially if you look at this from the intense burning eyes of the Lord, and anybody who says that man is basically good has never read the Bible. The point is, we are not basically good before our conversion. That's why we need a Savior. Well, then, how about afterwards? Have you ever met a Christian? Are they perfect? No, they're not. Or, maybe you have some trouble in your church. Have you ever met a group of Christians that are perfect? No, of course not. So to be known by God versus this self-deception that I'm describing here, to be known by God is He knows the truth and still chooses fellowship with us. That's the amazing thing. So to be known by God is to be chosen initially, and then this ongoing choice. So I'm asking the same these three questions are the same, I think. Why did He make us in the first place? Why did He save us? And then kind of emphasizing today is, why did He stay with us? Why doesn't He just run? So to be known by God and to know that even after redemption, we are saved. Why doesn't He just run? Because we're still sinning. Well, it's not in His character, His Hesed, faithful character. And this broken relationship is fixed by Jesus. So it's fixed initially by knowing Him and being saved, but then it's kind of fixed on an ongoing basis. It's this continued knowing that we're still not perfect, and He's with me. I think here's the reason that God can tolerate us. It's because Jesus overlies us, indwells us, and He says to the Father, hey, this knucklehead is with me. I'm picking up his tab. So why doesn't He just run? Because when God looks inside of us now, He sees or chooses to see His Son. And what's our response? It's got to be humble and to bow down and know that we're deserving of death initially and we're saved by grace. And what should my behavior be? To exploit this good deal? No, change the behavior because God's given me so much. So what is it to be known by God? He knows the truth. He knows we're sinners and still stays with us, I think, because He sees His Son. Thanks for listening.